Hello and welcome to Daily Conversations over coffee with myself, Craig Stewart. Today is a special session. I've got Vaughan Mason with me from Silica, and we're here on day 2, the first session of CDAO Africa 2020. Vaughan, welcome to the couch.
Thank you for having me.
How's things going?
It's good. It's a nice environment that we are in, working from home and COVID restrictions, but I'm glad we actually be able to come together in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the greatest thing about these virtual events is that we're able to bring in conversations from different people all over the world. And today we're really going to be looking at leading cloud transformation for data analytics success. And you've recently, just sort of at the start of lockdown or beginning of the year, you moved from one of the big consulting and advisory firms into Silica. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into that move and sort of your current day role.
So I've moved into a company called Silica. They look after or administer unit trusts for a lot of a lot of the financial institutes within South Africa. My role is within a data change. It's called a data change lead. So I'm kind of playing a consulting role there as well. So looking into how we can advance the space and look at data. Been focusing a lot on data management, data governance. So I've just completed the Dharma course, which was quite good. And so it's a bit of a role. Moved in the middle of lockdown. So I started there on the 1st of June, completely working from home. I was just talking about, I've just sold my car, kind of moving into that, upgraded my internet lines. So
full gig economy.
Full kind of at home. And it's obviously very grateful for the situation, but it's an evolving space. I think the biggest thing is moving from the consulting firms into kind of a more internal role allows for a bit more freedom to focus and kind of build out those foundational elements a lot around that.
Yeah, actually kind of see the end result, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So one of the main thing we want to talk about today is cloud transformation. I think it's something that is on everybody's sort of lips, on their roadmap, on their sort of journey. And it's been around for a long time, and cloud is nothing new, but it really seems to be building up ahead of steam now. What do you think is kind of giving it that sort of sense of urgency in the market at the moment?
I think it's the way that the cloud providers are actually pushing the narrative and pushing that content out. As you say, it's been around for a long time. AWS was actually started down in Cape Town. So the EC2 instance, which is the Elastic Cloud Compute, the team was actually a South African team that was based in Cape Town, and a large portion of the support for that EC2 instance is still run out of there. So we're into a kind of a huge speed. In the Africa context, the data centers landing here. So we got Microsoft landed last year, we got AWS landed this year, Huawei is in the country as well. That has kind of brought the conversation to front of mind. Why? It's a lot of people are driving because of costs. A lot of people are driving because of the newer technologies. They can't do what they need to do. But there's a lot. There's a lot that's going on and kind of moving into that space. You kind of look at what each of the cloud providers offer. You've got about 196 services on AWS, 197 on Azure, 156 on Google, and these are growing at a monthly basis. So you kind of have to keep up with the pace of change and what's going on. And these services are all unique to the use cases that the customers are asking for or trying to address from that.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I've seen through the research and conversations I've had is that people understand to a degree why they need to move to a cloud architecture. They understand some of the benefits, etc. But there does seem to be a lot of complexity around who do you choose? Do you go through one of the main players or one of their partners and resellers? What sort of advice can you give to the people watching this? And as I've sort of alluded to, we've got 3,500 people registered for this conference, different levels, different industries, etc. So I'm not, can't say for sure where everybody is on their cloud journey, but maybe you can give them some sort of insight into what to look for when selecting a provider or sort of a type of architecture that they're going for.
Yeah, so I think the majority of the conversations that we're going to get at the moment is about the multi-cloud. And everyone's going, I don't want to be locked in with a particular vendor. Now, that's great, but there's a lot of complexity that comes with the different environments. So as I've just mentioned, the amount of services on AWS versus Azure versus Google, I'm going to stay with those three if you don't mind, because those are the top ones in terms of Gartner, and it's already complex just looking at those three. So if you look at those, the environment, you've got multiple different database servers, you've got multiple different kind of AI services, you've got different compute services, and understanding the fundamentals of how each of those work is kind of mind-boggling when you kind of look at it. So for me, the main thing to first kind of look at when you're kind of starting this is all the big providers have what they call adoption frameworks. So part of those adoption frameworks is understanding why you want to move to the cloud, understanding your costs, understanding your drivers, understanding the people that you have within your organization. So what level of those individuals do you have developers who have been using the cloud for a number of years? Are you just experimenting? What do your customers use? So in a South African context, Microsoft have been a big player for a large period of time. If you look at the majority of people, they're using Excel, a large portion of the all the Office suite. So connecting to that audience is going to be a lot easier to kind of drive. AWS has been in country for a large portion, but they're focused very much on the startup community. But you see that with a lot of the big banks over the last 2 years making very big announcements about, I'm choosing this cloud provider for the front end, I'm choosing this cloud provider for the back end, or I'm going fully on this cloud provider. Who's going to win in the end? Well, we're going to start seeing that in the next couple of years.
Yeah. So how that multi-cloud environment, from what I get is that it's kind of on the journey to cloud, which seems to be the term that everybody's using. There's a lot of sort of culture change that needs to happen. There's a lot of education that needs to happen. It's not as easy as sort of just saying, okay, we're going to put everything in the cloud. Obviously, there's data privacy and protection regulations as well. What have you kind of seen, even from your consulting days, as some of the key things and challenges that companies are facing sort of on that journey to the cloud?
So I think it's just understanding the cloud. So if you hear the marketing kind of messages at the moment, Microsoft Azure will announce that they've got 2 regions in South Africa versus AWS, who only have a single region down in Cape Town. Now you dig deeper into that, you go, well, Microsoft, you don't actually have 2 regions in South Africa. You have a region in Johannesburg and you have a region in Cape Town that is only available for customers or enterprise customers in Joburg that want an in-country backup facility. So essentially, you've only got one region that you can deploy services to. AWS have built up their data centers from the ground up in Cape Town. They've got 3 of them. They've got different availability zones, and they focus on that. The different models that each of the cloud providers actually go with in terms of regions, availability zones, all of that is, you've got to understand all of that and understand the services that they're offering. Now, not to kind of knock one or the other, but if we trying to find out the services that are available in country is also very difficult. So one of the posts I did on LinkedIn, as soon as AWS had launched, I went through and kind of pulled out all of the EC2 instances. So the instance is the machine configuration that you're allowed to have, or that you can deploy into the cloud. Now, globally, there are at max 238 instance types that you can deploy into AWS. The average sitting at about 196, give or take. These stats are not available anywhere, so you can't actually find them. You actually have to put them together. At launch, South Africa only had 71. And then they only had 78. Oh, I did the stats again last night. They only have 78 now. But those instance types are based on customers' pull. What does a customer want? Oh, if they only want smaller instances, they go for that. In terms of the services as well, there's limited services. As I said, there's 197 odd services for Azure and AWS. In country in South Africa for the AWS, there's only about 76 of those physically available in country. And I can't actually get the right numbers for Microsoft because it's so difficult to pull that. I can go onto the website, get all the stuff, but it takes a lot of time to put all those stats together. But again, as you said, it's understanding what's available in country, what is the regulations that you need to adhere to for your industry as well. And a lot of the industries are not fully fledged either. So the banking, the financial services industry, the SARB released a directive around that. But that directive just had everyone kind of all over the place, going, okay, well, what can I put in the cloud? Okay, where can I put it? If I tell you where I'm putting it overseas, are you still comfortable with that?
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of questions. So if you are moving, it's about understanding what are my regulation requirements, what services do I require, and where can I put it?
Yeah.
And then if you start looking at costs, well, the costs, as we will discuss a bit later, but the costs vary across the providers as well as across the locations.
Yeah. You kind of preempted my next question around those questions that a company should be asking themselves as they sort of go into this cloud journey, they transform into the cloud. Let's think hypothetically there's companies making a decision around cloud. Who needs to be around the table making that decision? And what sort of questions should they be asking themselves?
Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and egg kind of situation. So I'm going to bring it back to there's a book that was released in the early 2010s called The Next Kingmakers, which is focused around developers. And developers are the driving force around technology in an organization. Now, if you look at all the cloud kind of platforms, those are getting driven by developers who want the new shiny toy to kind of play with. So in terms of who should be around the table, the developers should definitely be around the table, the people who are going to use this technology. But that's where you've got to start educating the rest of the business as well. So in terms of the costing, your CFO needs to be around the table because they are the ones who have to change the entire model from OPEX to a CAPEX, from a CAPEX to an OPEX kind of model. So it's not about buying the tin that you're going to depreciate over 5 years. You're now paying for those services on a monthly basis. So the CFO needs to be very aware of the cost implications of this. Go through that. Definitely your governance people. So listening to a Gartner talk, I shouldn't probably say that. Listening to a talk last night, it's focusing on what is your cloud strategy, what is the governance, who are the right people. The fact that we're still talking about cloud strategy now means that people are going through the cycle of we're just going onto the cloud. Oh wait, how do we measure how well we're doing? Yeah. Okay, well, let's circle back. So your executive suites because it's a fundamental change to your business. It's a change to how you're operating. It's a change to the markets that you could potentially operate in. So all of those people need to be educated enough that they can understand, okay, what is an AWS, what is a region? What is availability zone at a fundamental level? And what services can I use and can't I use? And what do I want to use?
So from an analytics perspective, in the sort of context that we're talking about now, it's really about being able to test models quickly, sort of spin up environments, etc., bring them down when it's not needed. Is that kind of what you're seeing across the market? Is that one of the main drives towards this, is kind of the speed to insights?
Well, the speed to insights that's always been the main analytics drive. I think one of my kind of changing directions over the last year has been about those foundational elements. So insights are great, but you need good data to get to those insights. And that's where this all comes into it as well. It's about choosing the technology that is going to deliver on that and give you what you need. And it's understanding what you want at the end of the day, go through. Because if we look at from a database point of view in the cloud, we've got two types of databases. We've got relational and we've got non-relational. And then if you look at the cloud providers of what they offer, it's on those two kind of flavors. But if you look at a relational database, say just on Azure, we've got SQL Server. You've got 3 different kind of flavors of that as well. You can either go for their instance, you go for a virtual machine that you're running on it, or you're bringing your own license. And then you've got Postgres or MySQL or MariaDB. You got the same on AWS as well. So it's just huge in terms of what you're going through that. Do you have an IoT use case? Cool. Well, then you need to use the IoT hub. How do I stream that information? How do I connect all these services together? So it's a continuous kind of learning kind of exposure. And I think we've been very siloed in kind of our looking at some of these things. So, I'm a database specialist and we're just going to focus on SQL or Power BI or reporting. But your whole networking and everything and where your data is located and am I meeting regulatory compliance or am I delivering this service to the business? Those are the questions that everyone needs to start answering at this time as well.
Yeah. One of the, I guess, reservations that I've come across having conversations with people is that the cloud maybe provides them an opportunity to get things wrong at a bigger scale and a lot quicker. If you're putting in bad data quality into a cloud environment, and it's at scale and it's fast, you're kind of almost getting to the wrong answer really quickly. Are there any ways that companies can sort of mitigate those risks, or is it really about having the strong data fundamentals embedded first before you even decide to go into the cloud?
I think it's all the fundamentals around that. So for example, how can you move an application into the cloud if you don't understand your architecture? If you don't know the metrics associated with that application? The same with data as well. If I don't know the quality of the data, how can I ensure that the decisions that I'm making off that data are accurate? How do I test that? So a cloud gives you that ability to not have to buy tin. So if we think about a lot of people in the machine learning space, they want GPUs. They want to start using GPUs so they can start building out those machine learning models. Now, how complex are those machine learning models that they are doing it, or is the data quality so bad that they're having to clean it up? That's why they need the GPU. So for me, it's about understanding everything about your environment, about your data, about what you're planning to achieve, and then looking for the use cases, or you're looking for the technology that will support those use cases. Having that documented, I don't see a lot of people having.
Yeah. And I think that's some of the things that we've covered in the conferences that we've done previous to this one. Obviously this conference as well is really getting a lot of those fundamental parts right before moving into things like AI, deep learning, cloud, etc. And it's still an ongoing thing, and we've had some really good conversations around that. So I think maybe let's start talking then about cloud pricing. You mentioned earlier about getting the CFO involved. It's moving from a CapEx thing to an OpEx sort of pricing environment, a cost environment. There's a lot of misconceptions, I've been told, that people think cloud is to a degree cheaper, because you don't have the big hard infrastructure, data center, the heating costs, the cooling costs, all those sorts of things that go with that. A, is it true that it's cheaper? And B, what do people need to understand about the costing of cloud solutions before they make that leap?
Cool. Now, for this example, I have brought my laptop because it is quite complex to kind of remember all of these figures. So what I've done is I've sorted out two examples. So focusing on storage. So that's a basic kind of fundamental where everyone says, oh, storage in the cloud is cheaper. Cool. And the other example is focusing on a relational database. So, but I've gone for an open source, so for Postgres, so we'll kind of break those down. So for the first kind of storage example, we're going to look at storing a terabyte in the cloud, and I need to bring it back. Okay. So again, I'm going to just focus on the three big players in this space. So if we're looking at Google, so obviously Google doesn't have an instance in South Africa. So the closest that we can get is in Europe. So I've gone for the Netherlands, and we're looking at about 2 cents. So we're working in dollars now. So looking at about 2 cents per gig. So that costs $20. That's cheap. I'm storing a terabyte in the cloud for $20. That's amazing. We do it in Cape Town for AWS. We're looking at about $28. And we're looking at South African NORCs for Joburg. We're looking at $22. So we're pretty good. It's kind of around the same amount. Now I want to get the data back. So you'll see on all of the cloud provider websites, getting data into our environment, free. Bring as much data as you want. Because there's a very big catch. The catch is bringing it out. So it's referred to as egress or data transfer out, movement. So to get the data back from Google, $122. To get the data back from Cape Town, so they give you the first gig free. AWS will give you the first gig free. After that, you're going to pay $157 for the rest of the terabyte. And to bring it back from Azure, it's going to cost you $184. So that's where the cost comes through. So if you're very comfortable with moving your data into the storage buckets and kind of leaving them there, that's fine. Just don't don't kind of bring it back. Now look, just to kind of put it into context, because if people are going to ask about this is hot storage, this is kind of frequently accessed, so it's the pricing that I've used for that. Now we go, okay, well, can we do it for cheaper? Okay, well, let me move this data. I don't want to store it in Cape Town. I don't have a requirement from a legislation point of view. So I'm actually going to store it in Ireland. So the cost to store it on AWS, so it was $28 in Cape Town. It's actually $23 in Ireland. Now, if I want to bring the data back, it cost me $92. So the data is traveling halfway around the world, and it's going to cost me less to bring it out onto the internet. Very similar for kind of Azure as well. We got $22 for storing it, so it's about the same price, but it's going to cost me half the price. It's going to cost me $88 to bring it back. So there's a lot of kind of complexity that kind of moves around with that. Now you go, okay, well, I don't need to bring it back out the internet. I just want to keep it within AWS or keep it within Azure. Cool, you're still going to pay a huge transfer fee. So if I store data in South Africa and I want to replicate it up into Ireland, AWS is going to charge me $150 to do that for that data set. And in terms of Azure, it's going to cost me $200 or $199.68. So just to be technical on that. But to find this information, I had to go through 5 different links and kind of move it through. It's not the networking costs are going through that, or where you're going to charge it, your data transfer. And so yes, storage is cheaper. If I'm going gig for gig in terms of buying a physical hard drive, installing it, it is cheaper. But getting the data back and moving it around, that's when costs come. Now that's where the multi-cloud question comes into it. So now I've got a multi-cloud strategy and I've got data stored in 2 places. I'm going to use AWS for my storage, and I'm going to use Azure for my analytics. Your data has to move between the two. So you're going to get costs for taking it out. You're not going to get costs for putting it in, but you're going to get costs for taking it out and put it back. So it all kind of breaks down into that. So is it really cheaper? And that's why having your CFO and having the person understand those numbers and break them down and kind of work with it and going, okay, what is the long-term effect of this? How can we move it? Now the argument will come, okay, well, we can start using reserved instances or reserved pricing. Cool, that will give you a discount. But if you don't use those from day one, it's disappearing. It's like data on your phone. If you don't use it, it's gone. So you've got to understand all of those kind of dynamics around it and how to move it from there. So that's where the cost kind of complication gets quite complex. And one of the consulting firms is pushing a very big proposal around cloud complexity management. How do you manage this complexity? How do you understand it, and how do you kind of drive it forward? So look, it's a very silly example about putting a terabyte of data into these storage blobs, but it kind of proves the point of moving the networking out.
So what's the payoff then of cloud? I mean, assumably you, as an organization, you're not having your own data center and all the costs that come with that. Very often, it could be based in a very expensive city, rental more buildings, etc. So that's one of the obvious savings that you've got there. But what are then sort of the better returns? Like, what are the advantages? What are the benefits that you're going to get from being in the cloud? It's obviously not just a savings thing. Because there's obviously those other costs, the transfer costs, etc. So why are people doing it? Like, what are the ultimate benefits of it?
Well, there's a huge skills shortage in terms of keeping data centers running. So the economies of scale for the big providers over the long term, they're able to keep those data centers running. Now, if I want to create a data center for my organization, I need to have a facilities manager. I need to kind of buy all the tin. I need to have someone who is going to install the hardware. I'm going to have to insure it. I'm going to have to get generators. I'm going to have to then have a Windows admin to install the operating system. I'm going to have a virtualization, have a storage admin. All of those kind of responsibilities that are not required for what you need to do to deliver your business, is you still need to do those. Now, shifting to the cloud, you're taking away those responsibilities. So if I'm a database developer, I don't have to worry about the underlying OS or even the server and the connections to that. I just have to worry about the database.
Yeah.
Now there's security aspects that you need to consider, and that's a lot that comes into that. But all of those things, it's if I'm getting rid of that physical stuff and letting the cloud providers handle that, and I can focus on actually what delivers value to my clients and my customers, and focus on those. That's where the true benefit comes from. It's also the services. So if you think about it, you may be able to answer, how complex would it be for you to get a computer vision kind of service running within your own environment? You've got to kind of have the AI model the machine learning model that's going to come with that. You're going to have to train that model. The cloud providers have that already available as a service. So if you want to test out a concept, if I want to test out a concept of being able to identify the objects in this room, I could use that service. And it's already kind of prepackaged, and I know what the output is, and all of the kind of the hard legwork has been done. So I can focus on going, cool, well, our coffee is going down, let's get another coffee delivered. Those are the kind of models that I want to focus on for my business. I don't have to build the entire kind of data set behind that and move it there. It comes with its own other challenges, but it's what are your business outcomes? What are you trying to achieve as an organization?
So it's kind of getting things into production way faster than if you had to do it yourself. All right, we're running out of time, so I thought maybe what we could do is, in a way of by way of summary, is maybe what are your top 3 tips for everybody watching as they embark on their cloud transformation journey?
So I think one of the first things is don't rush it. Kind of understanding why you want to move into the cloud. For me, as well, as I wouldn't choose. I'm going to go against the complete kind of industry you focus on, and I wouldn't go multi-cloud. To be perfectly honest, I would find a cloud provider that is meeting a lot of my use cases into those environments, and if they're not meeting those use cases, I would look very hard at if there are ways of working at that. The complexity around these environments comes quite high up. It's also about training the people up. Training everyone from the CFO down to your junior developer. What is the cloud? What are the costs? What are the governance? What are everything that everyone has to kind of look into? What is our strategy for our business in the long term that we can kind of tie all of these things back to? So obviously education, it's a continuous learning kind of process. The amount of services that come up, you have to stay ahead of this. So it's kind of training up the individuals, focusing on what you need to get out as a business outcome, and maybe choosing one cloud provider in the long term. If you're worried about vendor lock-in, well, I have not seen very many use cases where people can actually move between cloud providers quite easy. So to give you, if we go take it back to an example, I'm running a database. On an Azure, I want to move that database to AWS. The database itself might be easy to move, but I have to set up the network. I have to set up the connection to that environment. I have to set up the security policies. There's a whole bunch of complexity that comes with it that if you're working on 2 different environments, you have to duplicate that complexity the whole time.
Okay, good advice. Before I let you go, as is customary with the show, tell us a little bit about your relationship with coffee.
Coffee. So I am black the whole time with coffee. It's Americano, and it needs to happen very early in the morning. I have 2 young boys who like to wake up as the sun comes up. So works in winter, not so well in summer.
No, I'm with you on that. My kids are also 5 o'clock in the morning or so. So as fast as I can get some coffee, the better. Vaughan, thank you so much for joining me.
Cool.
Keep up.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cool.